All right, guys, sorry I'm getting to this late. So what we're going to talk about this time is we're going to talk about how we're going to train to improve lactate threshold. And here, basically what we're going to do is we're going to push the envelope. We're going to push the threshold because most of the training that we're going to look to do, if we want to improve threshold, we have to actually recruit the muscle fibers that we need to drive that high power, high velocity movements. And that's going to be, we're going to get some of the bigger type 2s involved. So we're going to have to go at a high intensity. And then what we're also going to do is this is where using some nutrition can actually have really good effects as well. So let's take a look at this. So lecture 20, by the end of this series of videos, you should be able to contrast absolute versus relative changes in performance. So that means that when we're talking about training, if we're going to train you for 12 weeks, 8 weeks, well, if you're going to run the same speed, or you're going to cycle the same power, or you're going to row at the same power, then it's not really fair because you're not really comparing the same thing because you've had 8 or 12 weeks of training. So you've gotten 8 to 12 weeks better at that. So if you actually did a max test, your max has gone up. And so when we're talking about training at the same absolute power or speed, we're talking about going at, say, 15 kilometers an hour, or we're talking about going at a 200 watt power. So if that's the same before and after, it's going to feel easier after. So the relative intensity has gone down. So if we test you, it's going to look like, oh, all of these shifts have happened, like it's easier. Well, it is easier because now you've done that training, so you're already better. And so when we talk about this, it's really important to know whether you're looking at an absolute amount of power or speed before and after, or whether you're looking at relative changes in performance. So this is at 75% of VO2 max, because whether your VO2 max is here or here, if you go at 75% of your VO2 max, now your relative intensity is the same, all right? So the other things you'll be able to do are describe the training effect on lactate clearance, explain how epinephrine levels change following training, state how training affects these proteins MCT1, which is the influx protein, and MCT4, which is the efflux protein, and then compare and contrast different types of training on lactate threshold. You'll be able to describe the effects of bicarbonate on lactate transport and performance. And this is, again, the first place where we're going to say, yeah, bicarbonate. You know it as what you add into your cookies to make them get nice and light and airy. But that same sodium bicarbonate, not the exact same, but the same chemical structure, is going to be something that we can use nutritionally to improve lactate transport. The other thing that we're going to talk about at nutritional intervention is beta-alanine and how that affects buffering capacity. And then you're going to be able to describe the effects of beta-alanine on performance. All right. So really what we're talking about is we're talking about lactate, and then we always hear it as lactic acid. Okay, so lactate and lactic acid are the same thing because lactate it's a salt, so it's going to be a native ion, so it's got a native charge to it, so it's normally either sodium lactate or it's lactic acid. Okay, and so we're going to be able to have lactate. There's also going to be lots of different places within the muscle where we're producing acid, where we're producing hydrogen ions. One of them is when you reduce, or when you take NADH and you make it into NAD plus H, so that this NAD can be recycled back up here, and so that you can continue to go through glycolysis. All right, so when we talk about lactate, we're going to talk about it as lactate. We're not going to talk about it as lactic acid, but really a key component of lactate is actually being able to handle the acid component, because the acid component is something where if you can buffer the acid better, you're going to be able to go harder.